One of my most vivid memories of the time I spent on board the Mir space station is of a problem we had with the solar cells. These provided us with electricity. The computer was pointing them in the wrong direction, away from the sun, so our batteries were no longer being charged. It was an eerie feeling to hear the space station slowly shutting down its systems around us. Fortunately, we were able to solve the problem, but looking down on Earth, I was powerfully reminded that the Earth is no different from our space station. We too are totally dependent on the sun for our existence and for nearly all of our energy. And the Earth has its own natural solar arrays that every day store energy from the sun, the leaves of plants. Plants are very good at using energy from the sun. It makes possible the complex chemical reactions with carbon dioxide in the air and water in the soil. And that's how the plant grows and makes its food. The energy needed to do that is absorbed from the sunlight right here in these green leaves. No animal can do this. In the natural world, only plants are capable of turning energy from the sunlight directly into stored energy. A tree can take many decades to reach maturity. A fully grown tree represents an energy store that has taken perhaps 100 years or more to form. If we cut it down and burn it, we release into the environment in less than a day 100 years of stored energy. We've come to rely heavily on energy stores that are not hundreds, but hundreds of millions of years old. If we'd been around 300 million years ago, this is the kind of landscape we'd have seen. The Earth's climate was much warmer then, so even quite far north it would have been tropical, hot, wet and steamy. The forests would have been dense and swampy, made up of plants and trees like these. They're simpler than most of the plants we know today. Mostly ferns, mosses, and primitive trees. When the plants died, they fell into the swampy water and made a kind of a mushy peat. Over thousands of years, this peat became very thick, and then it was compressed by layers and layers of rock forming on top of it. 300 million years later, this is the result. Coal. Coal is one of what we call the fossil fuels, so called because it's made up of plants that died all that time ago. Oil and gas, the other fossil fuels, were formed in much the same way, usually under the sea. Hard to imagine how we'd get along without fuels like these. But at some stage in the future, that's exactly what we may have to do. At the rate we're using it up, we have enough coal within easy reach for another 250 years. But natural gas could start running out in 65 years, and the oil wells could begin to run dry in just 30 years, well within our lifetime. We're going to look a little into that future. Imagine an island, perhaps not so very different from our own. At present, it relies on its wealth of fossil fuels. There's gas and oil offshore and coal under the ground. There may be ways we can use them better while stocks last. Our main use of coal is to burn it in power stations like this in North Yorkshire. The energy in the coal is used to generate electricity. The electricity is delivered to where it's needed along a grid of cables. Every day, Drax consumes 33 trainloads of coal. That's a bag of coal burnt in the time it takes to snap your fingers. The amount of energy transferred at power stations is awe-inspiring. This one turbine generates enough electricity for a city the size of Leeds. And there are 6 of them at Drax, enough for a tenth of our electricity. But there is a drawback. It comes as a surprise to most people to learn that most of the energy that comes into the power station goes to waste. Only about 35% of the energy that's released from burning coal actually goes into the electrical cables that supply our homes, schools and factories. The other 65% ends up as waste heat. That's not because the designers and the engineers haven't done their job well. Apart from being the largest, this is one of the most efficient coal-fired power stations in Europe. The reason so much energy goes to waste is that after the steam has done its work in driving the turbines, it needs to be cooled down before it can be returned to the boilers and the process started again. These huge structures are cooling towers. Inside them, hot water from the power station is cooled by a draft of cold air. Coming out of the top of them is water vapour, just like you see coming out of the kettle at home. And although it doesn't contain any polluting gases, it does represent a huge waste of energy. You could say that these machines are designed to dump energy. Coal-fired power stations are built away from cities to reduce pollution. That's made it difficult to make use of the waste heat. But all that is changing by burning gas instead of coal power station right into the city. Television Centre, the headquarters of the BBC in West London, is rather like an airport or a hospital in that it's a building that never sleeps. At any time of the day or night, there are people here working. One of their main activities is to provide us with the news. We're going behind the scenes in the newsroom to take a look at it from a slightly different point of view. We're going to track all of the energy that's needed to put a news bulletin on the air, because this building is about to be in the news itself by dramatically reducing its energy bill. It's nearly 11 o'clock in the morning. Triona Holden prepares to read the news.
Triona, he was making noises about dropping back.
Minute to air, 1 minute.
14. Make your appointment.
Counting to air, 10,
Thursday,
9,
8 o'clock.
8 past,
Just read
7,
if you can, Triona.
6, 5,
A summary of the
4,
news now on BBC
3,
One with Triona
2,
Holden.
1,
Run titles.
0. On air.
Good morning. John Major and President Chirac of France are due to announce details of a new military initiative between the two countries within the next hour.
Yeah, hi. I've got Tim Hirsch on the line about...
Behind the scenes, a small army of people have been at work. We're at the heart of a massive communications network.
What time would you like a line book? 1:45?
There are satellite links from all round the world. Graphics need to be prepared. Tapes to be recorded. All of this equipment means an electricity bill for Television Centre of £1.5 million a year. Over 5,000 people work in this building. They need heat and ventilation. And then, of course, there's food. People need to eat, and these kitchens provide over 2,000 meals every day. And this building's more like a small town in terms of the energy it uses. The energy to keep all of these people warm in the winter and cool in the summer costs another £350,000 in heating and air conditioning. But that's about to change. The BBC is the latest in a growing number of companies which have decided that the best way to provide all their energy is to bring the power station to where the energy is needed. Inside this box is a mini power station. At this end is a jet engine fueled by gas. Just like with a normal power station, it's the engine that turns the generator, and the generator that actually makes electricity. That's here at this end. But that's where the similarities with a normal power station stop. At the back of the machine is a special pump. It takes all of the heat that might otherwise go to waste and uses it to provide warmth, hot water and air conditioning for the whole building. The system is called Combined Heat and Power, or CHP. There are no cooling towers here. Much more of the energy is used. There's even some heat to spare, and that could be piped into these houses nearby. By pensioning off the old boilers, the BBC will be cutting its energy bill almost in half. But the best thing is that 80% of the energy that comes into the building in the gas pipes is turned by this machine into usable energy. And remember that in a coal-fired power station, 35% is considered good going. If we can make the remaining fossil fuels last longer in ways like this, it will give us more time to find alternatives for the day when they do become scarce. Making electricity is not our only use for fossil fuels. Just travelling from one place to another accounts for 1/4 of all of the energy that we use. And again, it's the fossil fuels that we rely on. I'm filling up this car with enough fuel for over 300 kilometres. That's the great thing about diesel and petrol, that there's so much energy locked up inside them. At the moment, there's no other fuel that we can easily use in vehicles that gives us anything like as much energy for the same volume. The problem with these fuels is the pollution they create. The threat this poses to the world's climate and to our health is likely to force us to change our ways long before the fuels themselves run out. Here in France, they're working on the problem. And in a few years' time, it could be that we'll be driving around in quite a different kind of car. I was offered a test drive in this strange-looking vehicle at Peugeot's factory at Poissy, just outside Paris. Well, here it is. It's called the Tulip. What's so special about it is that it doesn't use petrol or diesel, but this car runs entirely on electricity. And that means no exhaust pipe. Now, the idea is that you don't actually own one of these. You rent one by the hour. And to get going, I need a key. And this smart card logs exactly what I do in the car and for how long I've been driving it. It's quite a nippy little car, really. It'll do 75 kilometres an hour. When you think that most of your journeys in a city are averaging about 20, it's quite fast enough. Most journeys as well will only be about 8 kilometres, and so with a range of 60 kilometres, this car is quite adequate for you to pop round to the shops, go to school, you can call in on a few friends. When the car's batteries are running low, there are no wires, plugs or sockets to mess around with. You just drive it over a special plate in the ground. There's a coil of wire in the bottom of the car. Now, when the car's battery needs charging, you drive the car into a charging station. In the floor of the station is another coil of wire, this one with electricity flowing through it. And when the car moves into exactly the right position, electricity is made to flow in the car's coil, and that charges the battery. Cities like Manchester are already thinking about how to keep people on the move without clogging up the city centres with polluting cars. The solution is to go back to a form of transport that's almost died out in this country: the tram. Because they carry a lot of people, the cost of travelling is much less than in a car. And there are other advantages too. They're fast, quiet, and very importantly, they're clean. Like Peugeot's little Tulip, the tram is powered by electricity. Of course, if that electricity comes from a power station burning fossil fuels, all we're doing is moving the pollution from the city to the power station. But there are other ways of generating electricity that don't involve burning fossil fuels. Renewable energy resources that will never run out and cause no pollution. They're very much a part of our future. We receive from the sun in just 1 hour is as much as the entire human race uses in a year. In 1 month, it delivers to the Earth as much energy as in all of the fossil fuels that ever existed. Can we, like the plants, convert some of that energy and make use of it?
These solar cells, like the ones on the Mir space station, convert sunlight directly into electricity. Like them also, they track the sun in its progress across the sky. These panels work differently. They focus the sun's rays on tubes. The heated liquid inside them drives turbines to generate electricity. But to transfer large amounts of energy, these installations have to cover a vast area of land, a square kilometre just to replace one conventional power station. But solar energy doesn't have to be on the grand scale to be of use. In developing countries, the newest technology can improve the quality of life without all the paraphernalia of pylons and electricity grids. The cost of these cells is falling all the time, and they're useful in remote parts of the world. Of course, they only work during the day, but even on cloudy days they work quite well. One of the reasons why it's difficult to catch the sun's energy directly is that it's very spread out over the whole surface of the Earth. But it's this energy that drives our weather systems. The swirling masses of clouds represent another source of energy that we can harness. Energy in moving air. High in the Pennine Hills, some new machines dominate the skyline. Behind each set of whirling blades is a generator making electricity. The electricity from all of the wind turbines is collected together and fed directly into the national grid. You could say this is a solar-powered machine, but the energy in the wind is spread thinly, and we need to cast our net wide to catch it. The amount of energy we can extract from the wind depends on the length of the blades and on the speed of the wind. If the wind stops blowing, the blades stop turning.
Machines like these provide 0.5% of our electricity. There are 24 machines here, and these supply enough electricity for 8,000 homes. It's a small start, but there's more we can do to harness the energy of the wind.
There are enough windy places in Britain to provide us with 10% of our electricity. That's the equivalent of a power station the size of Drax. Remember, it generates enough electricity for 6 large cities.
You'd need 10,000 of these to supply that much energy, and not everyone would want one on their doorstep.
Would hundreds of wind turbines ruin this landscape? Is the noise they make itself a kind of pollution? Would you want to live in the shadow of a wind farm? There is an alternative. The wind around Britain is strongest where the wind farms would cause least impact. Out at sea. At present, it's very expensive to build them there, so there aren't very many. But who knows how that may change in the future? Wind blowing over the sea provides us with another form of renewable energy. Energy from falling water. By building a dam across a valley, we prevent the water from falling. It represents a store of energy waiting to be released. The water is channeled through pipes to turbines, and as usual, these drive generators that make electricity. The potential energy of each snowflake in the mountains will be transferred into energy in these wires. We're gathering up energy that had started to become spread out. The energy in the water flowing down the mountain is used to drive the train back up it. Hydroelectric power works best in countries such as Switzerland and Norway, where the landscape is mountainous. It provides a quarter of all the world's electricity, and it could provide much more. But there are problems. These pylons in Brazil carry electricity from the largest dam in the world. But the energy needed to build on this scale is possibly greater than all of the energy such dams will ever produce. And the lakes behind such schemes cover vast areas of land, displacing people and wildlife. Perhaps there's another way we can use the energy from water. This tidal barrage in France was built 25 years ago, but it's still one of very few in the world. In theory, it seems very attractive. Every day, twice a day, the motion of the moon causes tides around the world. The water rises because of the gravitational pull of the moon. So the source of energy here is not solar, but chiefly lunar. At high tide, water is held behind the barrage and released through pipes when the water is low on the other side. As the tide comes in again, the same process works the other way round. As with a dam, when the water flows, it turns the usual machines needed to make electricity. But this type of scheme is expensive and it can damage wildlife habitats. So maybe we should turn to one more way of transferring energy out of the sea: wave power. In 1995, this machine, called the Osprey, was towed to a point just off the north coast of Scotland, where it was to be anchored to the seabed. It's designed to convert energy in the waves into electricity. Again, the theory is fairly simple. The rise and fall of the water created by the wave energy would force air through two propellers at the top of the machine, and these would spin electrical generators. But sadly, it was not to be. A freak storm ripped apart the Osprey. It was proof indeed of the energy in the sea, but until a stronger Osprey is built, that energy remains tantalisingly out of reach. All the renewable energy sources we've looked at, and there are some more still, have advantages and disadvantages. Some take up very large amounts of land. Others are so expensive that at present to develop them is for sure. The fossil fuels will not last forever.
So whatever the future holds, we need to start thinking about it now. If we wait, the fossil fuels may run out before we have an alternative. And by then, it'll be too late.